The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Loiter. I'm a principal researcher at NRRI. Welcome to today's webinar as part of our monthly webinar series on issues of relevance and importance to the regulatory community. Today, we're going to look at sort of a new framework for demand-side management programs and look at that through the lens of New Jersey's recent experience. What I hope we can do for you today is to give you ideas and examples of things that might be relevant for you in your jurisdictions, and also to make it clear that we've got this excellent panel of experts who have lots to offer and may be resources for you in your own programs and projects and proceedings. With that, I'll just give a quick intro to NRRI. For those who don't know, the National Regulatory Research Institute. We are the research arm of NARUC, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. And our mission is to serve state utility regulators by producing and disseminating research that provides the analytical framework and practical tools necessary for effective regulation. And if you didn't catch that, you can find it on our website verbatim. And I hope you will look at our website if you're not already familiar with it. A couple of just quick administrative notes. I know everybody's been doing lots of webinars and video meetings. Today we're using the GoToWebinar platform, and we'll have the questions box or the questions feature active. So if you do have questions, please type them in, and you don't have to hold them. You can type them in as you think of them. If it's something that merits a clarification from the current speaker, we'll try to do that before they hand it off to the next one. If it's a more general or more involved question, we'll hold those for the end. But I don't expect any of the speakers to go more than 15 minutes, and so we'll have plenty of time at the end for what I hope will be a robust discussion. A little marketing, if you will. Our sister team within NARUC, the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, has their own webinar series, and you should see on the screen now some of the upcoming topics. I hope you'll go to CPI's website and sign up for the webinars that are of interest to you. So that, I think we're about ready to go. This is our panel today. I'm going to introduce Martha Blakely from Uplight, and she'll give a little background for the project and briefly introduce the rest of the panel before we get going. Martha, it's over to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Jeff. And hi, everyone. Welcome to my home office. I'm Martha Blakely, and as Jeff said, I run the Market Insights and Engagement team at Uplight, which means I spend a lot of time thinking about the future of energy efficiency, how energy efficiency policy goals across the country, and then work with stakeholders to deliver just that. If you're unfamiliar with Uplight, we are the result of a merger of 6 companies across different areas of customer energy experience. So as Uplight, we serve more than 85 utility clients and 100 million residential and commercial customers across the globe, delivering solutions such as behavioral energy efficiency, online marketplaces, disaggregation, energy management, non-residential DSM, and energy personalization, just to name a few. To give you a little context, though, on what we're talking about today, we all know that 2020 has been quite a year, but I'm going to take it back briefly to 2019, only a little over a year ago. At that point, New Jersey had the Clean Energy Act solidly in place. Governor Murphy had wholeheartedly supported the effort with an energy master plan, drafted at the time, but final later, that set the strategic vision for achieving ambitious energy reduction targets, relying on a significant increase in energy efficiency investment in the state. The New Jersey Board of Public Utilities was responding to that clear direction from the legislature and the governor by undergoing a stakeholder process with dedicated involvement from utilities, vendors, environmental advocates, and the like to figure out the optimal way to meet the ambitious goals set out in the policies. From Uplight's perspective at the time, everyone that should be engaged was at the table. But we also saw an opportunity as the conversation was playing out, especially with regard to program administration. Although we had inklings from the programs in the past across the country about what best practices look like, we also saw that energy efficiency investment at the level established in New Jersey will increasingly be important in other jurisdictions moving forward. So we really needed an organization with the research credentials to look more into the data. So as an industry, we have something quantitative to use on the effectiveness of energy efficiency programs and their administration. So something more powerful than anecdotal evidence and case studies. So with this in mind, we commissioned the Brattle Group due to their expertise, rigorous research methodologies, and also their established commitment to peer review to conduct a study like this. We established the context, but really expected Brattle to completely own the research. Not really sure what the findings would be, but we knew that they would be informative to the conversations happening in New Jersey. So since that time of initial thinking, lots has happened to set the stage for successful implementation of the energy efficiency transition. And I'm really excited because our panelists today will be able to talk firsthand on all of these developments. First to the study, and then how the state and utilities are forging a new future to meet the policy goals that they have. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Sanem Sergici, the principal investigator of the study I just mentioned from the Brattle Group, Kelly Moy, director of the Division of Clean Energy at the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, who really was the architect of shepherding the stakeholder process and enthusiastic the whole way. Anne-Marie Paracchio, Director of Conservation and Clean Energy at New Jersey Natural Gas, who, of course, involved, as all the utilities were during the process, but also has like deep expert opinion on how we actually implement. So I'm excited to hear from all of you. And without further ado, over to you, Sanem.
Thank you, Martha, for a great introduction and setting the foundation for my presentation. So I suspect anyone in this webinar needs convincing that energy efficiency has been and will continue to be a big part of our energy future. But let me say a few things to motivate, to lay out the motivation for the work that we completed. So customer-sided energy efficiency is nation's third largest electricity resource, employing 2.3 million Americans and providing most of the time the lowest cost way to meet customers' energy needs. As more cities, states, regions set increasingly ambitious clean energy goals and carbon reduction targets, energy efficiency will continue to be a vital component of the formula for success. In fact, New Jersey's Energy Master Plan emphasizes that energy efficiency is essential to reducing energy consumption and keeping the electricity rates under check while the state continues to invest in grid modernization. In the meantime, in addition to states and cities and regions, many utilities have been making individual commitments to achieve significant greenhouse gas emission reductions over the next couple of decades, and increased energy efficiency is a central part of these plans. And so it's sort of easy to see that these plans and these goals count on deeper energy efficiency savings and a broader participation from all customers. And this can only be achieved through a holistic, well-rounded approach to energy efficiency. So at a very high level, this approach should include, and if you can go to the next slide, Jeff, this approach should include a fresh look at energy efficiency program administration and delivery steps, innovative models and incentives for entities undertaking these steps, and a coordinated approach for planning and integrating all types of distributed energy resources across the energy ecosystem, that they won't be siloed, and there will be opportunities to take advantage of the synergies presented. The next slide, please. So our report, as Martha indicated, identified elements of a holistic approach that leads to a successful energy efficiency program performance. So in order to do that, we carried out an assessment of energy efficiency administrative models to inform the discussions in New Jersey and elsewhere. And we reviewed 4 types of energy efficiency administrator models: utility administrator, state or government administrator model, third-party administrator model, and hybrid model. So for each of these models, we discussed their structural advantages and limitations, both based on our detailed literature review as well as the experiences in various United States jurisdictions. But like Martha indicated, there has been this qualitative and anecdotal evidence regarding the effectiveness of these models for a very long time. But there was a gap in the literature that proves quantitatively or assesses quantitatively whether any of these alternative models are more effective in driving energy efficiency savings more so than others. So that's what we set out to do in this study. We undertook this regression analysis, and we've incorporated various regulatory incentives and mechanisms and other potential confounding factors to be able to isolate the impact of energy efficiency administrative models. It was a rich data collection exercise. We've received a lot of assistance from EEI, ACEEE, and RAP. So we basically leveraged the expertise of these other institutions who've been collecting, tracking data, and we put together this very comprehensive data set to run our analysis. And like Martha indicated, we benefited from the peer review of various energy efficiency industry leaders and had rich discussions with them that led to the analysis that presented in our work. I provided the link in the slide, so for details, please feel free to download the report and dive into the details. But today, so my goal is to just provide a brief introduction as well as a snapshot of our analysis. Before going into the analysis, here's a snapshot of energy administrative models across the United States. Prior to restructuring, energy efficiency administration was largely the responsibility of utilities. Restructuring prompted several new models to see if some of them are better suited to the needs and requirements of this new operating environment. So with that, some states assigned responsibilities to a government agency, some states assigned responsibilities to an independent third-party providers, administrators, and some of them created hybrid models. So the map on the right basically shows a landscape for energy efficiency administrator models. As you can see, it's still very dominated by the utility administrator models, followed by hybrid and third-party and state administrative models. This is basically the current look. The next slide, please. So as in the course of doing our study, we initially had several observations, again, based on our conversations with experts, based on the literature review. And our first observation was that no single administrative model is superior to the others across all dimensions. So we went through this exercise of identifying relative strengths and weaknesses of each of these models, which I'm not going to go through in this presentation. It's in the report. But you can see that based on this table, no single administrative model is clearly superior to the others in all aspects of the energy efficiency deployment. And in addition, idiosyncrasies of administrators in different states are likely to have a greater impact on the performance, on the success of the energy efficiency programs, more so than the actual model that they have been operating under. So therefore, our sort of recommendation suggestion was that each jurisdiction should weigh these strengths and weaknesses carefully and decide which model is likely to yield the most cost-effective solution and sustainable delivery of energy efficiency savings in that particular state. And one thing that I want to highlight is that energy efficiency sector is a large ecosystem of various players, including regulators, utilities, and third-party providers. And what we have seen is that one of the most important roles of an administrator is to actually leverage the competitive advantages of all these involved parties that become the integrator and facilitator of everyone's strengths to deliver the most successful program overall. So that's observation number one. But we've also seen as, the next slide, please. In terms of, since energy efficiency programs have very direct influence on utility revenues, and this is regardless of their administrator status. They could be administrators, but they may also be not the administrators itself. Their utilities' full support play a key role in the success of these programs. And this is essentially because of the three challenges raised by the traditional cost of service model that need to be addressed in order to align utility incentives with more effective implementation of these programs. So the first, the foundational block, I should say, that should be addressed is the program cost recovery. Utilities will not have any incentive to fully pursue DSM opportunities if the cost recovery of the prudent programs that they implement is guaranteed or delayed. So the first foundational block is to ensure that the program cost recovery is certain and timely. The second block is the mitigation of the lost fixed cost recovery. We have to remember that an effective DSM portfolio would reduce the sales for utilities below the levels used to calculate the revenue requirement. And that means that utilities would not be able to recover their fixed costs and have an opportunity to earn their allowed rate of returns. So then the second important element to address is to ensure a lost fixed cost recovery through one of the mechanisms listed, such as full decoupling, partial decoupling, or straight fixed variable pricing. And the top block in this pyramid is to provide ways to improve earnings for those utilities to reward their full pursuit of DSM opportunities. Again, this is when they go above and beyond of facilitating, implementing, integrating these energy efficiency programs in their other planning efforts. So, so given the importance of these mechanisms, we figured or decided that any exercise in trying to identify the effectiveness of energy efficiency administrator models would be incomplete if we weren't able to control for all these important regulatory incentives that different states have different combinations of. The next slide, please. So in this context, our third observation is that having a clear and long-term commitment to energy efficiency emerges as one of the most important determinants of energy efficiency success. This commitment most clearly manifests itself in specific long-term targets for energy efficiency savings, which are implemented through energy efficiency resource standards in 26 states as of 2017. These are basically goals that are set through statute or legislation and commits to states to achieve these goals on a year-by-year basis. So if you look at this figure on the left-hand side, it compares the average incremental energy efficiency savings in 2017 by incentive mechanism. So we've grouped incentive mechanisms from top to bottom. At the top, we have partial decoupling or LRAM, And the next one, we have a performance incentive mechanism. The third groups of bars is full decoupling, presents the states. And the fourth one is a combination of full decoupling and performance incentive mechanism. And in this chart, the gray bars represent the savings from those states without energy efficiency resource standards. And the teal bars represents the savings from those states with energy efficiency resource standards. So as you can clearly see, and also I should note the red dots represents the average targets from those states included in each of these efficiency buckets. So based on this figure, the best savings performance is achieved by states that have both full decoupling and PIMs. So that's the fourth block of bars in this chart. And the presence of performance incentive mechanism seems to have moved achieved savings closer to the targets. So again, doing any statistical analysis or regression analysis just by going with the plots and visuals, we have a clear sort of signal here that having the right combination of incentive mechanisms not only increases the savings performance, but also increases them closer to the saving goals. And that the states with the saving goals are clearly overperforming compared to the states without these saving goals. So again, this was a big motivation for the approach we followed in our study. The next slide, please. So having these observations and knowing that there was this gap in the literature that quantitatively and authoritatively explored the effectiveness of different models, we compiled this very detailed data set using data from 50 states and a District of Columbia over the course of 2012 to 2017. And we performed a regression analysis to identify the effect of the energy efficiency administrator models. And again, the question that we set out to answer was that are any of the energy efficiency administrator models associated with better energy efficiency delivery performance after accounting for various incentive mechanisms and other confounding factors. The next slide, please. So here's the results from our quantitative assessment. So I don't really expect us to go through the regression results on the right-hand side of the table. For those of us who are not regression or statistically inclined, I'm just going to spare you really going through the results, but highlight a few things in this table by focusing on model 3, because we ran different versions of the regression model to get to the most comprehensive specification. So with the variable that we're trying to explain here is the energy efficiency savings as % of the overall consumption in a given state. And we've included various variables such as the energy efficiency resource standard goal, whether full decoupling, LREM, PIM, performance incentive mechanisms exist in that state, whether the state is restructured or not, the level of electricity prices, and the model, energy efficiency model that they implement in the particular state. In addition, we've included energy efficiency spending as % of total revenues, electricity sales revenues in the state, some years trends, and some economic indicators that control for states' economic performance. So what we found is that if you look at those utility administrator, third-party administrator, and hybrid binary variables, none of those variables are statistically significant, meaning that none of them are associated with higher energy efficiency savings compared to the other models. But interestingly, and I wasn't too surprised because again, having been in the industry for such a long time and talking to the experts, but it was great to verify this through data. We saw that full decoupling and performance incentive variables are positive and statistically significant, indicating that they are associated with higher energy efficiency savings compared to those states without these mechanisms. Another interesting finding is that the states with energy efficiency resource standard goals, higher electricity prices, and higher energy efficiency budgets are all associated with higher energy efficiency savings performance. So again, this is, we were very pleasantly surprised with the results from this analysis, because we followed a very robust data compilation effort, complete data set, and we had a pretty long time frame, at least as long as we could go. And those imply that it's mostly about having the right mechanisms in place and not necessarily about one model or the other in terms of the energy efficiency administration. So with that, the next slide, please. Again, the takeaway is that no single administrator model is associated with better performance, and what seems to matter the most are having a state level energy efficiency goal and is committing to this goal on a long-term basis, because the parties, the players in the energy efficiency ecosystem need certainty to be able to make those investments and to be able to continue to deliver over a long-term horizon. If there is not a certainty, not a commitment to energy efficiency, it's not realistic to achieve a high energy efficiency performance. And again, dedicated energy efficiency funding is another signal for commitment, and availability of full decoupling. This was interesting because we have found that only full decoupling was associated with higher energy efficiency savings, and LRAM, which is essentially the mechanism, only accounts for the impacts of energy efficiency programs, not looking at a sort of a whole all types of things that may affect energy efficiency sales, but just focusing on the impact of energy efficiency programs on the utility revenues, did not seem to be associated with higher efficiency savings. And that kind of prompted questions in our minds. And again, we talked to several other experts, and the explanation that we've heard is that in some cases, implementation and proof of LRAM tends to become very complex. That may be the reason why full decoupling have outperformed the LRAM mechanism. And last but not least, having these additional performance incentives that really signals the utilities and the players to go above and beyond the plans and the goals and targets, really delivers on their promise. So these four drivers collectively highlight the importance of a state's commitment to a long-term energy efficiency agenda, and enables utilities with the right incentives to help and be partners in that endeavor. So with that, let me pause here and turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the thoroughness and detail on this excellent analysis. We did not receive any clarifying questions, so I will move it over to Kelly, and she will describe how they made use of this very important information in deciding how to move forward with DSM programs in New Jersey. And we should be able to see Kelly in a second here, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great. I hope you can see me. Thanks so much for the introduction. So we're really excited to talk about our New Jersey experience today, and really proud of the work that we did. And I think Martha said enthusiastic about our stakeholder engagement, which was part of that process. So we certainly think that energy efficiency is going to be playing a key role for us, and are really proud of the action that we've taken as part of our clean energy goals. Next slide. So in our portfolio of clean energy initiatives, I've often found that energy efficiency doesn't seem to get its due for the vital role that it plays. Certainly in New Jersey, we've had a lot of clean energy initiatives moving forward, offshore wind announcement and exciting EV plans, our overhaul of the solar market. And all of these have overshadowed the bedrock of what we consider to be our clean energy agenda, and that's energy efficiency. We really think that, and I'm sure everybody on this call knows that energy efficiency is key for meeting multiple goals of decision makers and interested parties, environmental advocates, and constituents. And it really has no match in that it can, as you can see on the slide, reduce costs for customers and improve health and comfort, reduce transmission and distribution costs, certainly reduces the need for increased generation, and decreases greenhouse gases and much more. So this past January, our state adopted our most ambitious energy master plan ever. And during the drafting of the plan and at every public meeting, we heard time and time again how important energy efficiency was in contributing to our clean energy future and our goals for 100% clean energy by 2050. So we really think that the board's action on June 10th delivers on the promise for a strong start in achieving all of our cost-effective energy efficiency. Next slide. We had a tight time frame established by the Clean Energy Act, and the Clean Energy Act was certainly well thought out and detailed, but extremely ambitious as a piece of legislation. It was filled with studies and advisory groups and establishment of quantitative performance indicators and deadlines. In addition to that, setting out our first ever energy efficiency resource standards, the Act also included the closing of the solar market, establishment of a solar transition, a robust energy storage targets, and so much more. As often occasionally happens with legislation when it's drafted, many of the things in the bill came due at the same time as well. So as Sanem just mentioned, we saw a critical component, and it was very clear from the legislation that a critical component for the success of the state was setting these resource standards, these targets for ourselves. We did have tremendously ambitious goals from a climate-forward governor and supportive legislature who, as I mentioned, were recognizing the role energy efficiency could play. We had a study to determine if the goals set by the legislature were achievable and determined that they were. We were required to set out quantitative performance indicators to ensure that we met our targets, and the legislation also required a stakeholder process. Next slide. We also, as a team and at the board, established a number of principles to guide the development of our energy efficiency transition based upon what we saw in the legislation and our energy master plan, as well as executive orders. And we focused in the following areas. We wanted to make sure that there was access to all energy efficiency programs for all market sectors, no matter where they were within the state of New Jersey, no matter what utility territory or geographic location. We wanted to ensure that there were decreased energy burdens for all ratepayers with a specific focus on low-income communities. We were focused on striving for increased accountability and consistency and reporting, as well as having feedback mechanisms so that we could continually evaluate and update and improve, and also wanted to ensure transparency for participants. We also focused on expanding job opportunities and increased economic benefits as well. And one of the core components that we found ourselves coming back to time and time again was a desire to balance flexibility within the program and consistency for optimal outcomes for both participants and contractors as well. Next slide. So here's the list of our most recent stakeholder engagements. And I should say at the outset, our energy efficiency transition process was not as smooth as we would have liked at the beginning. Certainly as an agency, and I'm sure that others who are on the line can understand, we had significant capacity constraints, including a division staff that hadn't grown in size quickly enough to meet the ambitious goals and lightning fast timelines that were in front of us from the legislation. So initially we started out with one big stakeholder meeting in February of 2019, followed by 4 smaller meetings on our market potential study. And this was all coupled, of course, with a pretty unrealistic timeline for what we needed to accomplish. Certainly, I think there was some confusion about the process at the beginning and maybe some lack of clarity on the goals and concern about the lack of structure for engagement. And so in July of 2019, we took a step back and restarted the process. We reorganized our staff into teams with subject area work streams. We focused on program administration, cost recovery, utility targets, evaluation, measurement, and verification, and filing and reporting. Each of these had a coordinated timeline that fit into our overall timeline, lists of questions to answer and issues to address, and I should say that seemed to grow daily, and studies and papers that we needed to look at. And importantly, each team had a lead staff member and members who were taken and sourced from throughout the Board of Public Utilities, all working together. So as you can see from the slide, over the course of 11 months, we had 10 public stakeholder meetings with participants ranging from 80 to just under 250 at each meeting, in addition to smaller, technically focused working group meetings. The meetings were arranged by subject, and we had one or more meetings on each of those subject areas. In addition to the stakeholder meetings, we also put out 4 straw proposals for the public to respond to, and that helped staff to really refine and mature our thinking. So as a result of this, and hundreds of pages of comments, which the team really poured over, we were able to get a sense of the programs and what we were putting forward. And I should say, you know, I've often found government agencies are criticized for not being responsive and for checking a box with a stakeholder meeting, particularly one that's required by legislation. But the success of the process, I think, that we had is that we were able to listen to and engage with stakeholders and take their input, and they could see that it was considered and included in recommendations as the process advanced. So this certainly takes a considerable amount of time and energy from staff, but ultimately, I think as a result of that, there was a lot more buy-in in the result and a better outcome as well. I should say we certainly did crib shamelessly from the experience of other states. We poured over research and other state experiences, databases and programs, studies like the one that we just saw, knowing that there were leaders that were out there on energy efficiency wanting to take the best of their efforts and modify it to have it work for New Jersey's unique circumstances. Probably most importantly, in this thirst for information, we embraced the stakeholder feedback, and we were seeking balance in supporting both best-in-class energy efficiency while being protective of ratepayers. So all in all, I'd say the team's pretty proud of the recommendations and particularly of the process over the last year, and we're looking forward to seeing it implemented in the next year. Next slide. So I think of all of the efforts, I think the most meaningful for us were our efforts on equity. Over the last year, board staff was guided by goals of the legislation and our citizens on the ground experience, which put the need to address equity and low-income access and delivery of energy efficiency into high relief. As a result, we focused on issues of equity in program access, in local workforce development, and in supplier diversity, all of which we found are critical components to program participation and also to ensuring the ultimate success of the program. And our efforts were really underpinned by the BPU's commitment to ensuring all New Jerseyans have access to clean energy and related workforce and job development opportunities. We certainly believe that a more fair and equitable clean energy future is one that affords benefits to all its communities, and we're working towards that goal. We studied a variety of EE programs and incorporated best practices from across the country, but most importantly, I think we listened to stakeholder input to guide our recommendations and sought to meaningfully incorporate 3 elements that we found came up time and time again as stakeholder priorities. Those were employment, program enrollment, and strong oversight and accountability. You can see on this slide some of the examples of the recommendations that were made based on this stakeholder engagement. Next slide. So on to program administration. Certainly the Brattle Group study noted that program admin might not be the most significant in determining a factor for success, but we certainly felt that it was going to play a key role and was something that we needed to address. We looked at our own experience with programs and with utilities running programs and with hybrid program approaches. We evaluated the program administrator strengths and weaknesses. We took a long look in the mirror to determine if we were best suited to run different programs that we had been running. And in the end, we determined we would have a hybrid program. We recommended transitioning the administration of a large portion of the programs over to the utilities. And in addition to that, the legislation had called for an increased role for the utilities, we believed that this was appropriate because of the direct connection to the customers, the ability to be more nimble and responsive, and the knowledge of the system needs that the utilities have. Next slide. This is just a probably more detailed than necessary slide that shows how the programs were divided up between administrators. And I think of important note here is that because of those principles we initially established of both consistency and flexibility, we required that the utilities provide core consistent programs in addition to allowing for additional initiatives and pilots that would not need to be core and consistent among all of those utilities. Next slide. So a key component, as Sanem said, is the utility targets. And this is a relational map slide that shows how we worked to ensure successful delivery in the establishment of our utility targets. So we developed overall targets for the state based on our market potential study and established goals for all of the entities, both the utilities and also the state, that rolled up into our statewide goals, as well as the system for establishing performance review, which incentivized achievement of those targets. We established the metrics, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, which were the policy objectives to ensure that we were meeting key objectives of the state, like small business savings or low-income savings, for example. And we established a weighting criteria over on the right-hand side of the screen, which you can see, and those were metrics to modify and appropriately weight the key policy goals. And we went above and beyond what was required in the legislation. We ended up setting our overall preliminary targets for year 5 at 2.15% by year 5 for EDCs and 1.10% by year 5 for GDCs. Next slide. One of the other components is, we had a desire to ensure that we had a feedback loop. We knew that we wouldn't get the design of the program right the first time. We knew that we would need a longer period of time to assess the success of the program, but we built in this feedback loop, the triennial review, we call it, which would allow us to engage with stakeholders and working groups and required an every 3-year review of all of the items that are listed on this screen. Some of these were required by legislation, but we added a number more in case the board wanted to revisit and potentially modify in the future. Next slide. So moving on to cost recovery, I think we were introduced to the humble 3-legged stool, but what we ended up calling it were the pillars of cost recovery. I think it has a nice solemn ring and denotes the importance of this issue as a key success. And we found that through our research and ACEEE's offerings. Next slide. So for the recovery of program costs would be associated with operations and maintenance, which would be expensed, included in the utilities annual true-up filing. The recovery of program investments we proposed would be amortized over a 10-year period, based on the capital structure from a utility's most recent base rate case, incorporating both the cost of debt and the return on equity with no modification. Next slide. Moving on to the next of the 3 pillars, potential lost revenue consideration. Revenue loss we proposed would be addressed by allowing utilities to recover lost revenues that they could demonstrate were able to be attributed to their energy efficiency and peak demand reduction programs. This is the LRAM, which we found through our research and the setup of the program that we thought could be relatively easily implemented. We had some positive experience in the state with a conservation incentive program run by 2 of our gas companies. And so in the alternative, we recommended that a modified conservation incentive program or a modified SIP be developed in partnership with all parties in between the time of the board action in June and the utility filing in September. And then if that was not able to be developed and agreed upon, the utilities would resort to using the LRAM. Next slide. Oh, I think we're one behind. There we go. Thank you. So just this is a graph showing the performance incentive structure. This is how we pictorially represent our performance incentive and also performance penalty structures. So the utility, if they met their targets, would be within that buffer zone of 90 to 110% of the target achievement, where they would be neither awarded an incentive nor assessed a penalty, but would receive that set return, which is the ROE weighted against the cost of debt. If the utility performed better than the target, they would earn a performance incentive in the form of a higher return on equity, scaling up 50 basis points linearly between 110% and 150% of their established targets. And similarly, if the utility received, if the utility went below would receive a penalty, performance penalty in the form of a reduced ROE, it would scale down linearly 200 basis points between 50 and 90% of that scale. If the utility was unable to reach even 50% of their targets, then we recommended they would be deemed non-compliant and assessed a penalty of 0.75% of the base rate distribution revenue in the previous year. And I think given a lot of conversations that were ongoing about the transition and some of the new challenges that we've seen in this past year, we also recommended and the board adopted penalties to be at the discretion of the board. Next slide. Finally, critical component, as I mentioned before, was robust oversight of the programs. And so as a result of this, we set up a new evaluation, measurement, and verification framework where we would procure a statewide evaluator who would play a key role in ensuring that we were meeting all of our evaluation, measurement, and verification principles for not only the utilities, but also for state programs that were run. And we really focused on principles including independence, that the evaluator should be free of bias and shouldn't have a stake in the outcome of the evaluations, that they should be structured and timely, consistent and predictable, so that the program administrators and the evaluators would have the same standards, transparent with an opportunity for stakeholders to be engaged in the progress and to monitor the process, and also notably adequately funded. Next slide. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Kelly. We have one quick clarifying question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On the cost recovery, can you very briefly say what types of items are characterized as program investments? What falls into that bucket that would come under cost recovery as a program investment?
Yeah, do you want to flip back to the page? That would be great. So these would be all of, O&M we generally consider to be kind of the staffing costs associated with it. For program investments, we capture as all of the other costs associated with the running of the programs. So that would include any of the costs of setting up any of the programs that would be run by the utilities. So it's a large portion of the overall program costs.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
So just for anybody who has joined late, the quick summary so far is that we heard about a study that looked at administrator models and other factors that may be predictive of efficiency program savings. We heard from Kelly just now about how New Jersey used that information to create a new framework and to set up a new structure for how programs would be delivered in the state. And now we will hear from someone on the ground, as it were, who has the opportunity to deliver these programs and to work within this framework and help make those programs successful. So Anne Marie, you are up.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm happy to tell the story as to the next leg of the process here after Kelly just set the foundation for what their decision meant. So my name is Anne Marie Praccio. I work for New Jersey Natural Gas. And I think one of the most important things for us to start on is actually to just kind of look at the framework of New Jersey itself. I recognize a national audience, many of you may not be familiar with New Jersey, but from a utility landscape, it can be hard for you who are used to really large utilities in other parts of the country to realize that we're really talking about 7 different utilities working together and a mix of utility experiences. So we have 3 EDCs 3 GDCs, and 1 combo. And within that space there, we have one of the EDCs serves less than 100,000 customers, and our combo serves more than 2 million customers. So we have a range of big and small utilities. We also, in New Jersey here, are one of the most diverse states in the nation, from not just our population, but I think even in terms of the composition. So we have urban sections, we have lots of suburban sections, we have rural sections. There definitely is farmland down in South Jersey. We are the Garden State. And it's a real mix and diversity. So we are going to have a large variety of programs to really meet the needs and the access that Kelly talked about. In addition to those 7 players then too, we also have the foundation of the New Jersey's Clean Energy Program, and that is the statewide program that is going to continue running that, certain elements of the programs. So with that in mind, I think we can start talking about the programs that are shifting over to the utilities. So these are the 3 key sectors that the utilities will be inheriting: the residential programs, commercial programs, and multifamily programs. Now, one thing in terms of those sectors that you're not seeing a separate call out for is low income programs. And that is by no means to suggest that that is not a key component in the state. Low income programs stayed in a separate category that was shown on Kelly's slide that's co-managed. The low income program is one that was never transferred to the state administration. The utilities had been running it successfully and collaboratively for nearly 20 years. So we intend to still continue to run that program that way with the same funding source. So that's why it's not addressed here really as part of this decision. The multifamily sector will be a new separate carve out as a sector with tailored approaches for that. Previously, they were addressed within both the residential programs and the CNI programs. But I'm not going to go through each of the points, but you will see recurring themes to what was captured in Kelly's. Again, focus on making sure all customers are served. So solutions for low and moderate income customers, even within the other residential programs, specific opportunities for small commercial programs, and then serving the unique needs of multifamily programs. Multifamily customers. The one piece that you do not really see on the utility side is the new construction programs, because that remained with the state. So now, taking those program areas in mind, I think we can shift over to, how do you go about designing what those core programs are? And you really have to consider all the perspectives that are coming together. So I talked about the 7 utilities that we have there. So of the 7, 4 of them are multi-state utilities. So they are bringing in perspectives from multiple other states. Then we have 4 of the 7 utilities had experience running energy efficiency programs in New Jersey. And 3 of those 7 were programs that worked as complementary to New Jersey's Clean Energy Program. So a strong familiarity with the existing programs that we have here in New Jersey. Then we're also trying to incorporate stakeholder feedback, which informed the BPU order and the goals, key themes that were all addressed within Kelly's, in terms of trying to increase the energy savings that was being realized here in New Jersey, maintaining a strong focus on more solutions for low and moderate income customers, for small business customers, to continue a focus that New Jersey has had here for a long time in wanting to see comprehensive energy saving projects, the role that financing can play. So all key pieces that are in there in terms of trying to bring those objectives in at the same time. And then the last piece off to the side, and honestly, as someone who's been close to the market for a while, one of the most important ones is consideration of current NJCEP program design. So we're going to go through this transition, and like all transitions, there will be bumps in the road, but we're trying to be very cognizant of what the existing market is used to, make improvements towards all those policy focuses that we talked about, but at the same time, try to avoid disruption as we make transition to these core programs. So it's been a really important piece as the utilities do work on coordination. So shifting over to what have we really done coordinating as utilities, we were active participants throughout all the stakeholder proceedings that Kelly had mentioned. And in terms of not just actively participating in those meetings individually, but we did a lot of work behind the scenes, and we're collaborating on comments and common positions wherever possible. We also took the opportunity to review the feedback from all the other stakeholders, both their comments at public sessions and then filed comments, so that we really had a sense of what other stakeholders were looking for. What we did really to try to get to the core pieces too is we did break into a number of utility specific committees. These are not public working groups, but with the task of what we have to do to get ready for our filing is we really kind of needed to chop this up into bite-sized pieces to try to work on it. So we set up separate committees by sector for residential, commercial, and multifamily, and then another grouping that's kind of common areas of interest and pieces where we know we will need consistency. So within cost recovery, EM&V, and then also cross-cutting issues. And again, keeping some of the other themes in mind, like the focus on low to moderate income customers. So while we do have those individual committees, I think it's really important, something that we learned over the summer is none of that sits in a silo. While an issue might start out in the residential committee, we could, as we're discussing it as a group, quickly realize, hey, this has implications on CNI and multifamily as well. And then in that case, we might roll it up to the cross-cutting committee so that we're not reaching different decisions within different sector discussions. And then it would be kind of vetted at that cross-cutting level and then filter back down to the individual committees. And likewise, you could, in one of the other committees, have an issue that could start in cross-cutting and then need to move to EM&V or move over to one of the sectors. So it's been an iterative process. And it's really key, though, in terms of maintaining a focus on some of those pieces, because this is such a large endeavor to try to get to this coordinated filing in the time frame that we have. And one thing that's already clear to us as a utility group is that this does not stop the date that the filing goes in. We will continue to have a structure and need to coordinate with each other in terms of resolving the case itself, but also as we move to implementation and continue to refine and make improvements. So talk about coordination and those elements, but what does coordination really look like? So this is a list of the pieces that are required to be coordinated from the board order. Very challenging to try to tackle all these in the time frame that we had. So one of the first things that we had to do as a group was really prioritize. We just physically could not be able to solve all of these things between the date that we had the June 10th order and then being ready for the September 25th filing. So one of the key pieces is we just kind of went through list by list and we looked at something like common forms for contractors and customers. That's a very important element for stability in the market, but it's not necessarily something you need for the filing process, especially due to the fact that during the cases, oftentimes there can be minor adjustments that are made to the programs after you have additional stakeholder feedback and the regulatory process itself. So it wouldn't make sense to invest a lot of resources refining that right now. But there are other pieces on the list that are critical to get into the filing right now. So examples are the customer eligibility, the range of incentives, what qualifies for financing. So those were the pieces that we had to focus on first, and we have had extensive discussions throughout the summer. As I noted, we had already been coordinating prior to the decision, but there are some pieces that we couldn't really tackle until we knew exactly which programs were going to fall within our scope. So one of the key solutions then was we decided that we needed to establish a statewide coordinator. So the state is having the utilities run the programs, but we do have separate EDCs and GDCs for large portions of the state. And the state clearly wants to maintain the same focus that they've had on comprehensive energy solutions. So what we need to do then was create a system where you're not saying, yes, we have comprehensive solutions for you as a customer or a trade ally, but we're going to send you in two separate directions. You're going to have to knock on the door of your EDC, knock on the door of your GDC, and then figure out how to navigate it. We are going to make it be a seamless experience for a customer where they can work with just one of the utilities, and then through the contract that we will have set up with this function with a statewide coordinator, there will be work that's done behind the scenes to properly allocate the energy savings and the cost to the sister company or the partner utility in this case. So it really is going to do is it's going to make a much better experience for our customers and our contractors and all the other trade allies that are involved and simplify some of the processes. Unfortunately, this key solution is not something that's just sitting on a shelf that we could just go walk over to a vendor and say, great, we'll take that. We recognize that it is going to be a custom solution. So over the summer, the utilities had already issued an RFI to inform our filing process, get some feedback on that, help us frame even what the cost and functionality would be. And now we will have that established within our filing, but we also working on a parallel path. We have to be working on that RFP right now to secure that statewide coordinator, select a vendor, and start building that system. We are not in a position where we can wait for it to be resolved and then figure it out because of the lead time in building it. But we recognize it is a key piece to ensure we can still have comprehensive solutions with a good experience for the customers and the trade allies. Okay, next slide, please. So now specific to NJNG's world as an individual utility, even as part of that core process. What we have to do is we have to really look at the mix of core programs that the utilities have agreed to and are still continuing to refine ideas, and then also take advantage of the path for the additional utility-led initiatives. We have to look at the combination of the two to make sure that we're broadly serving the market, getting the right solutions that are there, not doing anything that would disrupt the existing market, and then also consider how that combination of the core programs and the additional utility-led initiatives will help us meet the qualitative performance indicators that Kelly mentioned, and especially the energy saving targets that's out there. As New Jersey Natural, we're also going to have to really take a step back and consider what mix of internal and external resources we're going to use to deliver those programs, and very importantly, to increase demand for those programs. Historically, for the programs that NJNG has run, they have primarily been run with all internal resources. But part of the core programs that we are inheriting from New Jersey's clean energy programs is going to bring us new functionality, because a lot of the programs that we ran in the past were run collaboratively with New Jersey's clean energy program. So in that new world, we're going to have new functions and we're going to have brand new programs. So we're figuring out the mix of additional staffing needs we may have, and then which pieces we may want to use a program implementer for. As I've noted already, we do have some significant timing challenges in terms of the filing. And then we will have that ongoing pressure because we will need to be working on implementation pieces while we are resolving the case. With that in mind, the focus is definitely on, most important, the core programs to avoid disruption to the market, to layer in the additional utility-led initiatives that are going to put us on the path to energy savings. And then we'll continue to keep our eye out for other innovative pieces. You know, we love being at industry conferences and seeing the other great things that are going on, things that are, people are trying. But this is probably not the first cycle where we're going to have dozens of extra innovative pilots come out, just because of the focus on the transition. So many of the utilities are looking at pilots here and there, but some of the other ideas may have to wait for the next triennial, just recognizing the challenges that we're facing on timing. So then looping back to SNM's original discussion, I am very fortunate that we have had that strong foundation in place for a while. And I can share you that it has created strong corporate support for everything we have done on energy efficiency. Kelly referenced the Conservation Incentive Program, or CIP. So New Jersey Natural Gas is one of the companies that has had that modified form of decoupling in place since 2006. What makes it a little different from traditional decoupling is that it does have some additional consumer protections in place and does have a shareholder funding commitment where we fund some additional programs to help advance the energy efficiency market, or actually more importantly, the conservation market, trying to help people just understand how they can save energy. Then in the framework that we had prior to this decision, offering energy efficiency programs was optional for utilities, but New Jersey Natural Gas has had taken advantage of that opportunity since 2009. As soon as it was out there and we had the ability to make it a business proposition for us, that was something that we were interested in, and we have aligned that within our company. It's a key piece because we recognize that when you do this the right way, it's an important strategy for customers to help them reduce their energy burden. It's an important piece for meeting state policy objectives, and it's a business opportunity for New Jersey Natural Gas. So from our perspective, it would be crazy to not be exploring this and putting significant energy behind it. And that is something that you will see, that it is a key part of NJNG's core business strategy. If you were to listen to an earnings call, you would hear our CEO, Steve Westhoven, talk about the importance of energy efficiency and how it is a key part of our strategy for being part of the clean energy future. And it's also then something that we have broadly disseminated out through our customers, to our employees. We have asked them all to serve as champions for energy efficiency. And over the past decade, I can tell you, quite a few of our leads will come in from someone who has talked to a neighbor, engaged their child's school. Just this week, I had an employee tee up someone who was a landlord of a multifamily property who was looking for some solutions for their tenants. And I think it's those types of creative things of trying to leverage everything that you can are all critical pieces to really helping get us on the pathway to the aggressive goals that New Jersey has set. So I am really looking forward to the new future that we have here in New Jersey with this foundation in place, and looking forward to the Q&A this afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I want to thank all of the presenters and panelists and invite them all to come back on so that we can engage in some Q&A. I've got one that's come in from the audience, and I've got some. I wanted to check with all of you. Actually, if you could mute yourselves for a second, I'm getting a little echo. What I'm impressed by here is, and I should show up too. What I'm impressed by here is the complexity and the richness of this. SNM dug into a whole set of data about some of these administrative frameworks and some of the rules and regulations around the programs. And that was important. But then, we hear from Kelly and from Anne-Marie, the incredible effort that went into engaging with stakeholders and finding solutions that worked for, your state and your customers and ratepayers. And Anne-Marie, all the work that goes into coordinating among all of these utilities. And so I guess I'm looking for confirmation maybe or refinement of a statement that there's, even if you set things up right, the delivery implementation is still very, very complex. I mean, that's probably true of most things in life. But do you think that there's any, does it make it easier to do that coordination when you have that strong foundation, or do you think that's going to be a challenge no matter what? That's, I guess, a question for maybe Anne-Marie to start, because she's the implementer, if you will, and then also Kelly.
Yeah, I think the strong foundation is critical. And I think it's one of the things that kind of gets missed in the story on the decision itself. We tend to look at the components that are there, but the fact even that this foundation was established is critical. So I've been in the energy efficiency space here in New Jersey for a long time, and can tell you that there have been, wavering directions over the past years for where policy was headed. So it was, programs were run by utilities, then it was the state, then they thought they might give it back to the utilities, they might make an energy efficiency utility. When utilities were coming in asking for programs, sometimes you would only get a term of a year. At times, the program administrator contract, due to challenges with procurement, could be renewed for as short as 3 months. So there was kind of lacking some of that long-term vision. And now the board has done a fabulous job of really cementing, a long-term commitment that all stakeholders can see and understand that New Jersey is there. But just tremendous, really, in terms of really setting up the right signals to the utilities, to the trade allies, to everyone that's there. And one other key piece too, Kelly talked about the penalties piece, but one of the things that we really appreciated between some of the straws and the final decisions was that those penalties don't start on day one, especially in a post-COVID world. Trying to predict what customer participation is going to look like a year from now is not unique to New Jersey. It's a challenge programs across the country are going to face. And the board was excellent in responding to that feedback and recognizing that we shouldn't get hung up on that delivery in those first few years. We should take any efforts that we have to try to refine the transition and make sure we're not disrupting things. So it's good that it's not a punitive situation from the outset. Very supportive and grateful that the board did adopt that position.
Yeah,
thanks,
Jeff,
Anne-Marie. Please.
From my perspective, we got a couple calls after the board took action on June 10th, and they asked if we were going on vacation, and I said no, the work has just begun. So we had, certainly spent a lot of time, and Anne-Marie and the other utilities are working constantly on that coordination piece. So it's certainly been something for us, and we certainly recognize that in transitioning over from what had largely been at this point, state-run programs to really having the utilities play a more key central role in delivering those, that there was going to be a period of transition time. So to Anne-Marie's point, having that flexibility and allowing for a smooth and successful transition was really primary for us, because we really want these programs to be successful. In order to meet our targets, we need to set all of our partners up for success in this. And so that was, a key component, I think, in the board's determination on some of the different structures embedded within the framework.
I'm glad you mentioned the board. We have a question from one of the commissioners in our audience, asking if you could speak to the commissioner engagement in the process. We heard a lot about the stakeholder engagement. What was the engagement with the commissioners in the process, and are there lessons and guidance you can offer your peers across the country who are listening in?
Yeah, so as a staff person, we work for the board. We are doing research and work and bringing recommendations to the board, but it's the board's determination ultimately. But they played an incredibly critical role. They were at stakeholder meetings. They were engaged in all of the discussions, and probably from my perspective, also a great sounding board for us. We regularly were meeting with them. They have meetings with constituents and are, have the opportunity to engage with so many other states, and they were able to bring, really great suggestions and also caution us in terms of maybe what was initially an overly ambitious timeline, to make sure that we took the time to do it right and gave us that support, and really just played a key role in not only the development, not only the decision making, but also the development along the way. And so I think that engagement on energy efficiency, as it should be with all of our initiatives moving forward, was really a key component to the ultimate success of what the board adopted.
Thank you. Let me go back to Sanem, who's started a little bit of this with her study. Now that you've done this study, you've publicized it, are you getting any feedback from other jurisdictions who are interested in these findings, or interested in maybe a next round with every time you try to answer a question, you typically raise more questions. Is there another round of this, or is there a refinement of this that you're looking towards in the future to extend these findings in any way? Need to unmute yourself.
I always share my best and most insights when I'm on mute. So what I was saying is that we've definitely had a lot of productive conversations with regulators and the utilities. We're really trying to understand what will make this work, right? So a lot of states, cities, utilities making all these commitments, and you can tell their hearts are in it, and I feel like there's a much better appreciation for the role of incentives. Back in the day, I would say maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a more of a tendency to just set goals and trust the invisible hand that it would somehow work out. So I guess we've all become much smarter as an industry and know and understand that incentives are really the key to make this work. And if you can incentivize different parties, and you don't even have to have a very detailed, cumbersome process, because if everyone has their objectives straight, right, and if their incentives right, that they will work towards it. And just an anecdote, I was talking to a utility executive about a performance incentive metric, which is outcome based in their case. So they basically are told, this is what we expect from you. If you meet this goal, you're going to get this additional ROE. But we are not really telling you how to do it. We just care about the outcome. And I said, like how are you dealing with that? Does it create issues that you're not actually sort of plan things the way you've been planning them, for other programs and initiatives? And he said, that was our worry too, but it's just amazing how creative that made us as an organization. Now we're just going out of our way, reaching out to, different vendors, third-party providers, and really try to understand, like, how can they be our partner during this process. So I think definitely great conversations are happening. But one thing that I would maybe ask Anne-Marie and Kelly is, I think an additional sort of incentive or mechanism that New Jersey has is that utilities are able to rate base their energy efficiency spendings. Am I correct or not?
We do have the opportunity to earn on the energy efficiency investments, but I think even that piece is a good example of New Jersey adjusting their positions to make it more attractive to utilities, because that piece has actually been in place since 2009. So that feature of being able to earn on this and make it a business proposition, that's been out there. But even with that in place, there was only 4 of the 7 utilities who have been running programs during that time period. So the piece that was missing is most of the utilities did not have anything that addressed the throughput incentive. So I think that's a key piece, and it comes back to the 3 pillars that Kelly described. So without all 3, you don't have that same level of motivation.
Right, absolutely. And the idea is that if you really want deep energy efficiency savings and want the participation, you gotta put energy efficiency on equal footing with other resources, right? Make the level the play field. And in our opinion and in our research, we found that giving that opportunity to energy efficiency and the utilities to earn on those spendings is yet another important step to make sure that energy efficiency competes equally with other supply or demand side resources.
That's actually a really good sort of segue into a question I wanted to then ask Kelly that came in from the audience. And I think, Martha, you probably will have something to say here too. The question came in specifically about energy storage and how that does or does not meet the definition of energy efficiency. Because by conventional wisdom, it might be a cost saver, but it might be actually increasing energy consumption because of the losses in the round trip conversion. But I'll ask the question even a little more broadly, which is how does and if so, how does this new framework and the guidance and everything that we've been talking about today, how does that deal with other demand side management approaches, whether it's on-site generation or storage or active demand response and things like that? Kelly, can you speak to that? And then I'd also be interested in Martha, your take on it as a provider of some of those services.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it's something, that we spend a lot of time thinking about demand management, peak demand management, for example, and as it relates to savings and the critical component that it will play in energy efficiency moving forward. The peak demand management, demand management will be a component that's required for the utilities starting in year 4, so after the first filing of the first 3 years of programs. So something that we see as a critical component moving forward for, for all of our programs. With that being said, we did mention in the board order, and it has been, it's clearly a part of the Clean Energy Act that New Jersey has very ambitious energy storage requirements and goals. And the board is in the process of, developing a straw proposal and are looking forward to continuing to have a more holistic discussion about energy storage and the role that will play. But certainly there's no argument from us that that energy storage will play a key role moving forward in achieving our clean energy goals, that we have, significant robust targets for the state, 2,000 megawatts by 2030. We're looking forward to addressing that in a more holistic way, and that will also obviously tie in pretty significantly to our EE moving forward.
Yeah, and then from a provider perspective, a key component of a lot of our comments throughout the stakeholder process, and we were, I guess, emboldened to see that the board's order agreed with this, is that I think Anne Marie said how, they were prioritizing amongst the utilities what to tackle first because there's so much. And a key part of our comments is making sure that even though there's so much and there's going to be a prioritization of certain programs within the first program years, is to leave breadcrumbs almost so that we can add other demand side resources, such as demand response. I gave a bevy of products and solutions that we provide, and a key part of that is the connected customer experience, which means holistic energy management from those who are in charge of the programs. And so it's not just looking at things in a siloed way, which I think New Jersey and the order has really set up to be able to add those components as we go. So it's not just energy efficiency on its own, but it's energy efficiency within this portfolio to achieve the clean energy targets. And that balance between the tactical of okay, what incentive for this product are we going to do? And the strategic, how are we going to meet this energy reduction, requires that flexibility to use innovative approaches, but also understand that the portfolio in program year 1 is not going to be the portfolio in program year 4. And demand response, I think, is a really good example of that.
Thank you. I want to, picking up from that, again, it's very clear there's a lot of complexity and trying to address all these things holistically. I think you can see at some level in I guess there's 7 pieces to the performance incentive. Although I think a lot of those were, some of them are denominated in kWh. So maybe there's a question for Anne Marie is, do you have those same 7 just denominated in therms or whatever for yourself? But the bigger question for you, Anne Marie, is with so many aspects to that performance incentive, do you find that some of those are in conflict with one another, and how are you managing to those incentives, given the complexity of doing that? Are you going to be able to hit all of them? Are you going to have to be strategic in saying we can get these 5, but not these 2?
Yeah. So that's actually probably a good question for 2 years from now when we're doing that. Did it go, New Jersey?
I'm making a note.
Yeah, I think one of the other great things in the BPU's decision, so even though they set out all of those QPIs, we're not really being held to all the QPIs from day one, both on the penalty perspective, but then even in the early years, more of kind of the tracking is a limited set for now, with trying to build the foundation for all of them and then figuring it going forward. But there will be some pieces, that you have to figure out over time. And certainly to your question on electric versus gas. So there are gas demand related ones, and that's really new. We reached out for resources and we couldn't really find other states where there are gas demand savings goals that way. So it's kind of uncharted territory, and I'm sure it's the kind of thing that we will be discussing more in the case. And then also one of the key pieces that the board is setting up is a separate EM&V working group. So I think some of the practical considerations that we face as we roll this thing out, the board has set a fabulous foundation of really having, almost like an advisory group on key topics that will be able to provide some technical expertise, whether it's EM&V, workforce development, equity, but they'll be able to get other perspectives. And then when we, encounter the unforeseen challenges that we know will come up, there's kind of a forum for the board to collect additional input.
Thanks. Getting down to the last few minutes, I will encourage the audience to send in any last questions they have. And I think I'll, give you the opportunity in the panel. I sent Emmy was great. You already asked Anne Marie a question. Any of you have questions you'd like to put out to your panelists? I mean, I know you've sort of all worked together at some level on these, but did you hear anything today that was new to you that you want to follow up on? I mean, I've got my list, but I'll let you ask the questions if you have one. Okay, worth a shot.
All right, so no, I guess I have one for Anne Marie and Kelly. It's the whole beneficial electrification, right? Even though it's electrification, it's actually energy efficiency because we're saving energy overall by beneficial electrification. So what is board's current take of how beneficial electrification fits into the energy efficiency plans?
Yeah, for my part, critical component certainly mentioned in the board order, and an ever evolving position. I think there's a lot of work that's going on at the board now, and also certainly something that was highlighted in our energy master plan when it was released in January. There were 7 key strategies, and building electrification, certainly plays a key role for us in meeting our goals and objectives. So we certainly see that as, I think, I really like the way Martha said it with, with little pieces of connection, that, breadcrumbs that are being left. We've got a lot of elements in our policy initiatives that are interconnected to one another and all kind of rolling together to reach those, really ambitious goals that have been set out by Governor Murphy.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I'd add is from the energy master plan that there was envisioned, I believe, parallel paths. That there was intending to be a separate policy effort to look at electrification. So I think, again, back to the breadcrumbs, after there's recommendations that come out of that process, then it can be something that can roll into additional program design.
I want to ask one more question because it'll be pertinent. But before I do, I want to remind the audience that in the control panel, you can find the handout, if you will, for this, which is just the collected presentation slides that you've seen today. So if you want to refer back to them, you can download them from within, go to webinar. If you miss that opportunity, again, it will be posted on our website. So last question I'll have, and it'll probably mostly go to you, Kelly. Given our current situation, can you speak a little bit about doing the stakeholder process in this virtual, distanced world? And are there lessons learned that maybe you can offer to others who are listening in who may be going into the fall with a full docket, but unable to do things in person as much?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there have been, there have been a number of oops moments that we've had. We've had, huge storms that have rolled across the state of New Jersey, and we had people going on to backup computers to be able to run their virtual meetings, and, background noise. And I've got chickens, so sometimes they're squawking in the background, but we have found that actually we've had a lot more engagement from our virtual meetings than we had at in-person meetings. It has reduced the challenges of travel, the time constraints that people have. It's allowed more people to be able to participate. We went from, what were kind of 100-person, 115-person in-person meetings to our equity meeting, which was, 250 or so people and 19 panelists. So there's really an opportunity to engage more folks. I think the only thing I'd say is that for each of the, for the Board of Public Utilities, for any of the other PUCs, as you're engaging, it's really helpful to think about new routes to get information out. So I think we're still posting things in newspapers and on our bulletin board, but we also tried to use email lists that we had access to so that we could reach a broader group of people who may not necessarily be on our listservs, and they may not necessarily be getting our public notices, and to just try to do the best that we could to make it more accessible for people to be able to participate. So from my perspective, I think we've certainly learned something through this process and are more inclusive and more accessible in these meetings than we have been in the past. So I'm 2 thumbs up for doing this moving forward.
That's great. And Anne-Marie, I don't want to, people can welcome to stay on if they want, but I want to be mindful of the time. But there's probably, future webinars where we ask utilities and implementers how they have been adapting to the challenges that, the limits on in-person activity impose on, I think, as you addressed, how are you going to find customers, and how are you going to build demand, and how are you going to get into people's homes and businesses to do projects? So I don't know if you've got a quick 30 seconds about your hopes for how you're going to do that this year, or some of your key factors or key questions. But maybe we can think about revisiting this in a year once the results are in, if you will.
Yeah, I think for the most part, we're fortunate. If you look at those COVID maps, New Jersey is in a better situation than many other parts in the country after being hit hard early. So we are actually allowed to be back in homes, but we are very cautiously messaging it to customers saying, we're here if you need us. We're ready to come in. And honestly, there are some customers, it's the perfect time because they wouldn't want to take a day off of work, use a vacation day to have home energy audits done. But if you're working from home any day now, try to leverage that into an opportunity. If your business is still, restricted, now might be the perfect time to get an energy auditor in there as well too. And then I think the other piece that we are fortunate and lines up perfectly with a lot of the decisions that the BPU has made, the extra focus on LMI and financing will be key pieces. Having that financing available so that people who, when they are faced with having to replace a furnace, boiler, air conditioner, have that financing available to still consider the more expensive, high efficiency investment up front, instead of just telling a contractor, I'll take the cheapest thing that's on a truck. Recognizing long-term, that's the right solution for them. So having that be part of the suite to help moderate income customers be in, I think we're in perfect position for that because of the decisions that the board has made.
Well, this has been wonderful. I really want to thank all of you for participating. And I think one thing that's becoming clear to me, very loud and clear, is how much success can come from really working together. All of the entities that are represented here, and all the people and your teams and your colleagues whose work is represented, clearly all pulling for the same result, and how that can result in something very positive. And I think you've painted a very optimistic picture for what's going to happen in New Jersey in the coming years. So congratulations on that, and best of luck pulling it off. It's certainly not a slam dunk, but I think you're off to a good start. I hope you've enjoyed this there in the audience, and I hope if you have occasion to be in contact with any of the panelists, you'll thank them for their participation. And please, always keep check on the NRI website for our upcoming webinars and the things that we're working on in the future. We look forward to seeing you again at another webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.